Yeah, it's time for Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast from the Spacebook for the Fandom Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hadley, Birmingham's king of the geeks, your designated driver and mouth runner, here to deliver Doctor Who conversation once again on our big thinking, free speaking show for everyone. That's whatever decade or century you started watching, reading, or listening along to those ongoing adventures of our hero, Doctor Who. We chat about it all on this show. And we even throw in the odd laugh or two here and there, now and again, along the way. So come and step into our TARDIS and share this journey together here with us on Type 40 in this 60th anniversary year. Yes, let's make ourselves nice and comfortable and get stuck in, shall we? Where first? There we are. There's me. Okay, so hello, fellow traveller. I'm here again, but I'm not alone. I'm picking up a mate en route. And as we're going back to the 80s, it's only fair, only right that it's somebody who knows his ABC from his Haircut 100. It's my mate Simon Horton.
I see what you did there. Very good. I like that, Dan. Yeah. Of course, I wasn't born in the 80s. I didn't live through the 80s. I'm far too young to have done that. Of course. Everybody that knows me knows I'm pretty much. I've never actually grown up, to be honest. I'm still locked in the 80s. I'm very, very happily stuck back in early to mid 1980s, and after that, I'm kind of done, to be honest.
We just can't seem to leave this decade alone, can we? I'm playing more 80s music than ever. I think if I could manage to get my quiff up high enough, I think I'd probably go the full Paul Young, given half the chance, if I could get hold of a can of Bristow's. But they probably made that stuff illegal. It's probably very bad for the environment, I'd say.
I would have thought so by now. But it is undoubtedly, it's the best decade. Bar none. I'll fight anybody over this one. The 80s is undoubtedly the best decade.
Well, I've got some even better news for you, because things can only get better.
Well, hey, see what you did there?
Was that Howard Jones? That wasn't ABC,
was it? That was Howard Jones. That was Howard Jones.
It wasn't even a band, but I was close. I'm delighted to welcome back two, well, let's face it, they're exactly the same. They're not going to help us out of this, are they? They're going to languish in it with us. It's our friends John Collier and Alex Collier back on the show.
Back to the 80s.
Back to the 80s. Nothing finer.
Very much dressed for the occasion there, John. Very snazzy purple and blue neon tube logo shirt you're clad in this time.
Thanks, Dan. We can all appreciate a little bit of 80s style merchandise now, can't we? Just like the sort of stuff you used to buy in the 80s, in the exhibitions.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I remember those T-shirts for sale in the exhibitions. Never bought one at the time. Why didn't I buy one, John? Why didn't I buy one?
You could buy one, Simon, and do what I did, wear it every day. And now I've still got it, but it's like an old bit of rag.
Have you still got the original T-shirt? You've actually got it. Wow. What would it have been? One of the white ones? Would it have been white with a red logo or something?
It was black. It was similar to this, but it more sort of silver. The logo was would have been about 81, 82.
Oh,
yeah.
But at least you still got it. That's brilliant that you still got it. But you've got to be careful to make sure it doesn't fall apart.
It could have been when you go around these exhibitions and things as children. I don't know if you found this, Alex, but there was often so many things that I wanted, but only so much money in my little wallet. Well, it was actually more a sort of purse ring and a bit of string around my neck that I had been bought as a child, and it was very zero tolerance. I wasn't allowed to go over a certain amount. So when I went to these places and I had to buy a Doctor Who postcard, for example, I could choose two, even though there was like 12 that I wanted. Did you have that too?
Well, I think given my experience at the Blackpool exhibition, it was however many times I could get my parents to put their hands in their pockets. And of the two visits we had, on both occasions, we came out with bags full of stuff. So I guess it was a case of we're not going to be back here anytime soon, so get what we can. Which did include a Dalek T-shirt, illustrated by Von Vass, who did all the other range of T-shirts and other stuff for the exhibition. And I've still got it. It no longer fits me. In fact, it hasn't fitted me since I was about 8. And all that remains of it is the front bit of the design that I cut out, and it lives in a photo album. With
at least you can, again,
exhibition postcards and whatnot.
At least you've got it.
Here we are again, making exhibitions of ourselves, gentlemen.
Hey.
In a while, hasn't it? I was going to say, where have you been? What have you been up to? But I know you've been busy. But on the off chance that people watching or listening, they know your names but can't quite place it, where will they have seen your names before?
So we got together to work on our first book back in 2020. I can't believe it. And we released that in the August of that year, which was Blackpool Remembered. And then a year after that, we released Blackpool Revisited. So with the first 2 volumes, talking about 1,000 pages, all about the original Doctor Who exhibition and the second Doctor Who museum as well, that was run by David Boyle. And then we'd been messaging each other about Longleat, hadn't we, Alex? But neither of us ever went to Longleat.
Neither of us ever went. So we don't have that same sort of first-hand experience or that same emotional connection. And we thought, well, how can we make it happen? Because we don't have that, but we'll know a lot of other people that do. Like
the 2 titles, these 2 ebooks that were geared around the Blackpool exhibition, they started out, didn't they, as quite a small I wonder if we can kind of project, but it grew and grew and grew and got quite a lot of attention. I mean, it immediately piqued my interest. I think I got in touch with you quite early on in the project and you were still putting it together. But it really did catch people's imaginations, didn't it? And obviously led to the second volume. And I remember the last time we spoke to you, you said you're going to have a good long rest and weren't sure what you were going to come back with. But yeah, it does seem like you are back. Obviously, you're back here. You're back with a brand new project. And I can't wait to hear all about it, Simon.
I mean, in the meantime, I created another little book. Well, it ended up being quite large, called Up Close, which was another book about exhibitions, but looking at more recent times over the past 20 years. And to date, Blackpool Remembered has been downloaded over 11,000 times.
And let's just remind people, it's free. This was the big thing that
yeah.
I remember. That I remember when I first heard about the Blackpool book, the original one, and I couldn't believe that you were doing this for free. And it was just, but people have reacted so warmly to that original book, and I think I at least take some blame for what has now come about with the new book, because I do definitely remember badgering you boys when you I think probably when you were first on with Blackpool Remembered. I'm sure I badgered you then. And said, what about Longleat? You've got to do Longleat, boys. And here we are a couple of years later, and here it is.
Yeah, and for all that we're talking about neon tubes a moment ago, everything has gone quite diamond. Obviously, this year it being the 60th anniversary year, but we're in the. It's always an anniversary of something in Doctor Who terms, isn't it? So it may be the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who itself, but it's the 40th anniversary of something else, something very evocative, something very particular, and we're going to get stuck into talking about all of that in a couple of minutes. Yeah, but everybody's gone very into diamonds again. Have you noticed diamonds are absolutely everywhere, Alex?
Only on merchandise packaging, yep.
Yeah, it's back. It's all back. I think the neon logo will have its time again, but for the time being, I think
Fingers crossed.
Be happy.
But I think the diamond logo is it's become the quintessential Who logo, hasn't it?
Yes.
It has. It
evokes the best era of the show for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But for plenty of us, I think that our hearts may lie truthfully in the early 80s somewhere, and that neon tube logo. I don't know. The jury's out. Maybe it will have its time in due course. But yeah, for now, it's all about the diamonds. And if you'd like to do some real-time traveling of your own, of course, as always, you'll be glad to learn that each and every edition of this show, past, present, and future, is just a tap or two away on the device of your choice if you know exactly where to look. There's masses now, a proper time stream's worth of reviews, previews, interviews, geek outs, and deep dives with all our regular panelists and some pretty awesome guests. In fact, we know there's something for every fan over at type40.podbean.com. We're so convinced of that. There'll be another reminder about it all later on, and not before we make contact with that matrix of all knowledge that we call the Fandom Podcast Network for a word about all the other great conversations going on across all the other shows on the family over there. Okay, I'm pretty revved up now, I have to say, and I feel the hankering for the fresh air and the freshly mown lawns of Longleat. I don't think it matters which decade we head to when it's a place like this, a location like that. It has a sort of timeless feel, doesn't it, Longleat? But I think let's waste no more time. Let's go back to the past, back to the future, or the past, and a bit of both in the present. Okay, so these were heady times, everybody, heady times. And over Easter weekend, 40 years ago, carloads of families from across Great Britain made a kind of pilgrimage, didn't they? Even if the parents who'd packed the lunches and plotted the routes, they may not have been as aware as the kids were exactly what was going to roll out over the next 48 hours or so. And they certainly couldn't have predicted that it would change their lives. I think everybody who was there, to one extent or another, whether they could do both days or one day or whatever else, they've been talking about it non-stop ever since. So it was £7 all in to join the BBC's own, it was BBC Enterprises, wasn't it, official 20th anniversary event in the grounds of Longleat House in Wiltshire. And it was really quite the occasion. So I remember reading about it and being so envious that I couldn't be there. But it was advertised as it was advertised, as a trans-dimensional experience of all things Doctor Who. Simon, you were there. You made it.
Yeah.
Were they overselling it there?
No. I have long said that this was the best weekend of my life, and it still was. And that sounds like hyperbole, and it really, really wasn't. It was one of the best. When it was the very best weekend of my life, because all my Christmases came at once. I can still remember seeing the first mention of the celebration happening after, I don't know, it would have been an episode of Arc of Infinity or something like that. I can't remember. And immediately I pounced on it, because by that point I'd been going as a family. We'd been going to Longleat since 1978 to the exhibition. And so for 3, 4, 5 years at that point, I've been going to Longleat every year. So to suddenly have this, and I didn't know Doctor Who conventions, the kind of thing that DWAS were putting on, I didn't know those existed in those days, because I didn't even know DWAS existed. So to suddenly find a 2-day event happening at Longleat, which I already knew very well, there was never any question whatsoever that we were going. And so we were lucky enough to go. We actually got down there a couple of days beforehand. We did a family holiday down there. And so we stopped in our caravan in Longleat. So I was even there on the day before when they were setting it all up. And I hung around driving everybody mad, watching, asking questions. As I saw Daleks brought in and TARDIS brought in and marquees being put up. And it just, in many ways, this is a difficult show to do, simply because however much I gush about it, I feel awful for the people who were not there, because it feels like you're rubbing everybody else's nose into it.
I can't tell you how fed up I am of hearing about this event. It seems like everybody went apart from me, but those who were lucky enough to be there got a parade of doctors, didn't they? And companions, monsters and props, past, present, and even future, that they'd never forget. It was the Whoniverse's very own Woodstock, Alex. And now, thanks to yourself and John and an army of contributors, as always, including our Simon, Longleat 83, it's sort of back on again, isn't it? Albeit in ebook form.
This really, for me, I've seen videos and documentaries and YouTube clips and all sorts of things on the celebration event before. But this project was the first time afterwards I thought, I almost feel like I've been there. Through the amazing photographs that we were given that looked like they were taken yesterday, some of them, and just the fan accounts, which are just so warming, so vivid, so emotional at times as well. So it's really that combination of those clear memories that you can tell have been preserved over time, along with so many brilliant photographs of many, many rare moments that haven't been seen since. It really did feel like a little bit of experiencing it, I think, going through all this lot.
And did you feel the same, John? Because you
absolutely. Absolutely. We decided pretty early on that we wanted to split the book into two halves, really. The first half being take people right back to April 1983 as if they were there, and sort of do that sort of step through, walk through each of the tents, lots of photographs showing detail of what was actually on display and happening. And then the second half of the book, which obviously, Simon, you were involved in as well, was those accounts, those first-hand accounts from people, and the sharing of those personal memories and photographs. And Alex is absolutely right. We do feel like we've been there and we've seen it from lots of different angles. And I guess to some degree, readers will say, actually, I was there, but I didn't get a chance to see that bit, or I never saw that bit. I didn't know that happened. So it's been great to get a response from some people who did attend, who, like us, have discovered new things about that particular, monumental weekend.
And actually, the greatest accolade I can give to you boys is that, as somebody who was there, firstly, is the degree of accuracy that you've managed to get with this, of the events, of when they were happening and where they were happening. But also, while you say you feel like you were able to live being there as though you weren't, for me, as somebody who was there, it was brilliant to relive through the way you've done it, as you've done it with this walkthrough of all the different marquees, areas, so on and so forth. And so that's the greatest accolade I can give to you, is that you have achieved it. You feel like you've been there because as somebody who was there, that's exactly how it was. And it's quite amazing that because you weren't there, you've managed to do it. You've managed to recreate the event as though you were. And it's just brilliant. So for me, and for anybody else who was there, reading this book, I was rediscovering things that I'd forgotten, because one of the things with that weekend is it was such a sensory overload in every respect. There was so much going on. Nobody could have taken it all in. And so it's brilliant, as you say, to relive the bits that I might have forgotten or I didn't get to. And that's why you feel like you boys are living it now, because you've just recreated as best as we possibly can get that whole weekend. And so
it does seem that way every time you see pictures, every time you read accounts of this, because there are whole websites already dedicated to this, set up by just one person, often just recounting it. I think in sort of diary form, or as if for themselves as much as for a reader, sort of to commit it to the page or to words somehow, to preserve it. It seems to have been that important to people, but it does seem like it was a total whirlwind. I mean, the amount of things that I've seen, and I've never really researched it. You say, how long did this go on for? Because the amount of things that seem to be happening, you think, well, this must have been on for a whole week. Surely it can't have just been 2 days. But it seems that it was. But I was wondering, when you came on the show before and Simon hit you with the pitch for a book about Longleat somehow, and I would imagine that Simon wasn't the only one, that there were probably several people who said something similar. Is that how it was, John?
Definitely. I mean, as soon as the first book was released, it was like a bit of an explosion of exhibit. We call them our exhibition army, don't we, Alex? And the response was amazing. But it was, oh well, we never got to Blackpool. We only went to Longleat. When are you doing that one? And Simon was one of those voices, and absolutely. We were a little bit, it was just some trepidation in terms of not really totally getting the content and the knowledge of what happened. The only thing that I experienced...
Because you two gentlemen, like John, didn't you grow up or you had a family member who lived around the corner from the Blackpool exhibition? And Alex, you'd been there a couple of times, hadn't you? So Blackpool was very much one of the centre points of both your fandoms, whereas this happened decades ago at a location hundreds of miles away. You'd got no real connection to it, apart from that neon logo and a few stories that other people had told you at conventions, I suppose.
Dodgy black and white pictures in Doctor Who magazine.
Yes, yeah.
And I think we knew, we after, like you said, we spoke with Simon long before the book started, but we knew that for you, Longleat was like Blackpool was for me and John, the way that we think of it, the experience that we had of it. I mean, for me, certainly, it probably still remains the highlight of my childhood and of my fandom at the age I was then. it was the ultimate Doctor Who experience, and I really couldn't have been any better. And it stayed with us. So we knew that Simon and other fans that went would have that same nostalgia for it, and that was, I think, what we wanted to channel. And also maybe for all those fans that queued up and couldn't get in, another way of them to discover what went on there.
So just as we see the timetable of events, all these things have survived through the decades, haven't they? Been preserved by fans, literally preserved as documents. The way that you would some sort of biblical text, Simon, that you would find behind glass in the National Museum or something like that. Fans have preserved these things over the decades, and so we know, don't we, roughly, if not what actually happened, what went down exactly when, what they intended to happen where and when. And so put together, you can compare that with people's memories and what was committed to film, and hand it over to you guys who've been editing and collating and interviewing people to get their own words to sort of filter through, I suppose, what actually happened, away from the fantasy that decades of ever hazing up memories they can drizzle our memories, can't they? They can soak them in nostalgia that can replace reality, if you know what I mean. So were you able, through the skill set that you put together working on the previous books, arrive at a place where you could get to pretty much hard fact?
Yeah, I mean, there are things out there which are from that particular weekend. I think the closest I ever got to it was listening to Ed Stewart broadcasting on the radio. I actually listened to that live when it was taking
Simon, tell me about that. Yeah.
Well, no, I'll let John say about it first, and then I'll tell you what happened about that. But go on, you go for it.
I didn't even know it was happening. You know, it just happened to be on. We had the radio on at home because it was obviously the bank holiday weekend. So my parents were listening to the radio. And then they said they're broadcasting from Longleat. I knew the Longleat was taking place, didn't know that the BBC were going to broadcast from there. So that was the closest I got. And one of the things I did was found that recording and went back and listened to it, because obviously you're right, Dan. What you want to do with these things is try and base it in as much facts as possible. So that was my sort of only connection to it. And seeing footage, like Alex was saying earlier, you know, that there is footage around that you can watch. What's your BBC Radio story, Simon?
Well, I can so clearly remember Ed Stewart being there, and of course, for anybody that grew up in those days, Ed Stewart was a hero for us all. And so I can remember, and there are photos in the book of the announcement booth where they would make announcements from, and very often John Leeson would sit in this announcement booth, and he would make announcements in canine voice, obviously. You know,
I love that guy.
He would be telling you about at 10 o'clock you can get to the forum to see the Tom Baker panel, and at 11 o'clock Dalek Invasion of Earth will be starting in the cinema tent. I mean, you know, this is mind-blowing stuff. As I'm saying it now, I'm thinking, wow, I can still remember back to those days of just hearing these announcements. You know, do I go to the Tom Baker forum, or do I go to the Dalek Invasion of Earth, or Terror of the Zygons, or there's the auction taking place? So much going on. So as I say, I remember that little booth, and the booth was a glass-sided booth raised above, and so everyone could see John Leeson sitting in there, whoever it was that was doing the announcements, and so they could see Ed Stewart, because that was the booth that they used for Ed Stewart to do this first part of his broadcast from. That was the sort of studio that he used, and then he went out with a roving microphone. And I think I'm right, John, in saying I think the broadcast is still out there on YouTube, isn't it? Because I've heard it. Yeah, I heard it not so long ago. The whole broadcast, the entire thing. I think they've taken the music out for copyright reasons, but the entire broadcast is there. But as I recall, John, it was on for about 2 hours, wasn't it? It was the whole show.
Was it really?
Yeah, it felt like it was a long show. You're absolutely right. It's still available. The music's interesting because what they did was they got these sort of tedious links to the program. So they were talking about K9 at one point, and then they played a song about a dog. So it's quite funny to listen to.
How much is that doggy in the window? So
it was something like that.
Yeah, so you get these missing bits, but obviously Ed still introduces them, but they're not played, and it's well worth a listen just to see what their choices were on the day and how abstract some of the choices were.
And it's such a, I mean, it sounds, when you listen to it, it sounds so dated in that you realize how things have moved on in that time, because it sounds very much of its era.
And how slick things like that would be now, for example, when they cover not just the Olympics and things like that, but like the Live 8 event or the various music festivals over summers, you know. There's a lot of glass booths around.
It's very, very rough around the edges. But as John says, it's a brilliant document of that weekend. And of course, I never heard it at the time because I was there. So
in the queues, weren't you? You were queuing up all day, because this is the thing. This event has, for the most of us, the majority of us out there, who weren't there. For us, this is something that we just hear about all the time. So the queues that went on for hours and hours on end, that's something we hear about all the time. The fact that Peter Davison was walking up and down these queues, talking to people, he felt sorry for people who simply wouldn't get in because they allowed for so many thousand, but masses more turned up. So there's all these things that get passed down, things that we all know about this event, but not enough does get spoken about what actually happened in there, does it? It's all the extraneous stuff. And when I liken it to Woodstock, I think that's why, because those are the anecdotes that have been passed down. But what was actually said within those tents by the panelists, and who spoke to who, in what order, what was on display, that's been some of the very last details that I felt as a fan I've been trying to piece together this experience for myself for decades too. So for me, this book is literally a gift. It really is a gift, because the information there, I've had to kind of draw it in for myself into some rough approximation of what I think it may have been like. But here is probably the only chance I'm ever going to have, despite the videos that are on YouTube and the brilliant productions that Real Time Pictures have put out. This, I do feel, is something more tactile, even though it's on a screen rather than on a literal page. It's something more tactile that I can take my time with.
Yeah, and one of the things we did was we looked at contemporary reviews at the time, and it's quite funny because the majority of them are quite negative. You know, we've obviously got 4 decades since people
it's pissing it down, and I'm stood here for 3 hours.
We've got rose-coloured spectacles now, of course, when we look back on it. But I mean, there was a real reaction in the fanzines, in Doctor Who magazine, about how poorly organised, in particular, it was. And the team were very aware of that. You know, we've interviewed Lorne Martin and Julie Jones again for this book, and they're very honest about when they saw the amount of people arriving, they knew there was a problem. It's just they couldn't do much about it, really.
It became quite obvious pretty quickly.
Yeah. And so, you know, and one of the things they talk about is, you know, you've got to remember when this was the days before Ticketmaster and everything else. It's a different world now, isn't it? So announcing it on the telly after an episode of Doctor Who, putting a few adverts in some of the magazines that were around at the time, just the take up was much greater than they ever imagined it would be.
Well, I suppose as well, although, you know, John Nathan Turner has this reputation as being this kind of very genial figure. I wouldn't describe him as a visionary as such, but he was somebody who had a clear idea about how to upscale the show, both off and on screen. So I can imagine that he was kind of zhuzhing things up and thinking, oh, what if we tried this and that and the other? But it does seem to be a monster that got out of his control as well. So was it a case, do you think, of once it was up and running, they were running, everybody, even the organisers, running along, trying to keep up behind it and respond to kind of fighting small fires, Simon, as it was happening?
Well, you know, all I can say is this, as how old was I at the time? A 15-year-old, 14, 15-year-old at the time. I had no idea about any problems behind the scenes. So the kind of horror stories you read, they are reasonably unfair. The truth is...
Just one perspective.
Well, the truth of it is, it was very, very rough for everybody that was queuing outside to try and get in, because they didn't know whether they were going to get in, and they were queuing for hours. And yes, Peter Davison and various other people did drive up and down in Bessie just to wave to them, to try and give them something. So for them, it was very rough. It was also rough for people in the autograph queues who were queuing for hours and hours to get an autograph, because there was no real control over how many items people could take in to get autographed. But for me, who was in there and didn't read, well, I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't worry about the autograph at all. I gave up on the autographs. I never got a single autograph from Longleat. I just went to the forums, and of course, I'm very happy I did now, because those are the one things that you could never recreate again were the forums, and to go through things like you're looking at now, which was the set, the sets in the marquee, and so. And John Nathan Turner was a real presence there, walking around in his satin red jacket with that neon logo on the back. He was very much the master of ceremonies, but not in an egotistical way. He was typically John. He was calm, he was unflappable, and you wouldn't have known that they were having problems behind the scenes. And everything really did work like clockwork. That timetable that you brought up earlier on worked pretty much to the letter.
Did it really?
Yeah, absolutely. If it said there was a Patrick Troughton panel at 12 o'clock, there was a Patrick Troughton panel at 12 o'clock. And
there
it
he
did
was.
work. It did work. And so I was unaware. And so I honestly think people that moan endlessly about the queues are being somewhat churlish. I'm like, no, just be grateful you were there and revel in what it was.
Revel in the magic.
Absolutely. Roll with it.
Do you think
this was also, it was the first of its kind. There'd never been an official convention before. There'd never been anything like it. In fact, what other TV shows had their own exhibitions and conventions at the time, or had even lasted 20 years. So,
yeah.
I wondered, Alex, why did they choose Longleat? Because obviously Longleat is a stately home. Yeah, it's a big place, and they've got the parks and gardens. You know, it's not a small. You know, you could easily spend an entire day going around the entire place. This is a big estate, and there is lots to see. But at this point, you know, the NEC, I think, had opened in the mid-70s in Birmingham, not far from me. So they've got that option, and several other places over the country. And then, of course, there's Blackpool itself. I think as a child, paying attention to what was around the show, for me, I when they used to announce that there were two Doctor Who exhibitions, one at Blackpool and one at Longleat, I'd stop listening as soon as the word Blackpool was said, because Blackpool, lights, towers, rides, and Doctor Who, and Longleat, whatever. I was always far more interested in Blackpool. So I wondered, was there ever any doubt about it going to Longleat? Were there ever any other venues considered? Because obviously there must have been other places which would have been better placed to host this, because as Simon said, they put up tents and used stable buildings and things like that. So what did you manage to find out about that?
Lord Bath is key to all of this, I think, isn't he, Simon? You talk about this in the book, and that first exhibition that was there, based on the Science Museum exhibition they've been on in London. You know, he was very keen to have Doctor Who as part of the attractions at Longleat. So it made sense, I guess, with the amount of space that was available, to put up the marquees, that's where they would hold it. And John Nathan Turner had been to America. He'd actually been previously, just a few months before, to an American convention. And I think that's what in his mind he really wanted to recreate, you know, a similar event over here. And,
I see that.
And you know what we know, of course, is he managed to get people like Patrick Troughton, who'd never been to any conventions before. So for him, that was his very first one, and he did a number after. So you know, it was a time when it felt like things were really sort of changing in the world of fandom.
And also, I think you're right, John. Lord Bath was key to it. As I recall, it was, you know, he was very much involved from day one. As I'm sure it wouldn't have obviously been his suggestion, but he would have embraced the idea from the beginning. I recall stories floating around afterwards that he was less impressed after the event, from the point of view that all of his grass was completely ruined on all of those beautiful manicured lawns, because it just turned to mud. It was a damp weekend. I remember that. The second day was better than the first. And it was a bit damp. It was cold and it was damp, and that many kids tramping around over the lawns, it caused havoc. But I think it did make some sort of sense in a way when because of what they were planning to do. And to go back to what you were saying, Dan, I really do think John Nathan Turner was a visionary, because of what he was planning to do with because they were going to have the radiophonic workshop there doing workshops, they were going to have the visual effects department doing workshops, they were going to have makeup artists there, BBC department. The way they planned it, it did make sense to take over something like Longleat, where they had the space that, they were going to have to put up marquees, but they had the availability to do it. It was an easy thing to do for what they were planning to do, the way they were planning to do it. I mean, to put it in perspective, the marquee that had the sets in, the studio sets in, was ginormous. It was huge. I can't tell you how massive it was. It wouldn't have fitted in any. It would have fitted in the NEC. You're quite right. Wouldn't have fitted in any hotel or anything.
So it was
like
bigger than the average sort of wedding marquee. It was of a different kind of scale.
It was. Think of like 4 wedding marquees end to end, and you kind of got close to it. It was ginormous.
So with all these,
it was all on a big scale.
With all these first-hand experiences there, Alex, like Simon, he's obviously got some very, very vivid memories there of all manner of sort of sensations, down to how the grass looked. I would imagine then that there's lots of people who would come with, if not similar stories, then at least memories that are just as vivid, and you could piece it all together. How many people did reach out with their information, with their memories and photographs, all in all, roughly?
John?
It was around about 30, wasn't it?
Something like that, yeah.
And just like when we did Blackpool Remembered, for me and Alex, when you get these emails through with attachments of photographs and people's memories, it's just absolutely, you just lose yourself in that world. And we've got to mention, I know it's not 1983, but we've got to mention the 1978 floor plan.
Yes.
I know I got excited, and Alex always gets excited as a floor plan. But
we do love a good floor plan at Team Blackpool.
Come on, tell the story.
Go on, the 78 floor plan.
Yeah, no, this was very kindly supplied to us by somebody called Michael Clark, who had it sitting in his drawer, and they thought we talked a bit on Facebook, and he said, "Well, do you want me to send it in case it's of use to the book?" And we were like, "Yes, please." Because it obviously, like with the Blackpool book, getting the floor plan right was an integral part of that section. And I think that's particularly interesting myself and John.
This was the exhibition
It's
section.
not just about plotting what was in where, it was about really getting the little sort of bends and twists of the corridors right, and the shape of the rooms and where the exhibits were. Because none of that's ever really been properly done before.
Recorded.
You see, I think it was in TV Zone or something, there was a late 80s version, or there's some sort of drawings that appeared in an issue of DWM, and there was never a sort of a proper one. So like with Blackpool, we thought this needs doing, and getting the actual floor plan was partially key to the success of that. But it was it was from the late 70s. Didn't detail what was there, but it was showing you bits of ideas for bits of walls or things that were going to change, lighting plan differences and that sort of things. So it's really so we say original floor plan. It's not an original per se. It is some kind of large scale photocopy, but clearly dating to that time. In fact, I can attempt to show you, but it's large.
Go for it.
It's hard
because Simon, that was your first year in the exhibition, wasn't it?
That was right. I remember Alex, sort of floating this up, that this is on the way through the post. I literally just nearly wet myself because this was nirvana for me, because this was the floor plan of the exhibition in the very year that I first went to the Longleat exhibition. And the thing is, what people again have got to remember with this, and this is why John and Alex have done such a good job with the book, is that the exhibition in 1983 was as key to the celebration as all of the events, because in that weekend they just opened up, because of the location of the exhibition itself within the Longleat site. because that was within the bounds of the celebration itself, they simply did it free. I mean, you can just about see where is the exhibition. There we go. It's sort of bottom left-hand corner, the Doctor Who exhibition on that route map. And so because it was within the bounds of the celebration itself, you'd paid your money to get into those grounds. They made the exhibition free for that weekend. They didn't charge anybody. So you just had completely free access. As I recall, they literally pretty much opened the exit and the entrance, and you just wandered in whichever way you wanted to at your leisure. And so that exhibition that year was seen undoubtedly by more people than any other exhibition. And so that's why John and Alex really wanted to get this right. But that floor plan that Alex is now holding up, yeah, as I say, that was the 1978 plan when I first went there. So it's just incredible find for me personally. Just amazing.
That's huge. So that's an original, again, an archival document of great notes.
From what I can see, it's an architect's copy. I mean, they're literally called architect's copies in effect. They're massive photocopies. So it's a totally legitimate thing. It's not like it's just a copy. No, it'll be an original architect's copy, and those things would have been floating around to various different departments to work with. So it's a totally legitimate archive, piece of history, that.
So for those out there who don't know, because obviously this is now the distant past, the Longleat exhibition closed 20 years ago in 2003. But there was a Doctor Who exhibition there at Longleat House, and it was the longest running of the various exhibitions that have been open. It was there from April 1974 all the way up to 2003. I finally went in 1997, but Longleat House is this stately home near Warminster in Wiltshire, home to the Marquess of Bath, and it's included Britain's very first safari park and garden maze. That's what it's famous for, the not-we, for the normies. That's what they tend to talk about, isn't it? This huge maze. It's all open to the public, and there's lots of other attractions that are there on the grounds too. And I suppose for something such as this, which is all very pretty and all very historical and National Trust-ish, when kids would get dragged to something like this, there was some I don't know, romance to the idea of getting lost in a maze. I think I always loved a good maze when I was a kid, but this one was absolutely ginormous. And but the thing with a lot of these days out, I remember going on some when I was a kid, and quite often, you'd get quite bored. There wasn't enough to see. And so to install a Doctor Who exhibition at something like that, it broke up the day for the kids, didn't it? I mean, because a lot of these kind of locations all up and down the country would have variations on the Doctor Who exhibition, wouldn't they? Like miniature theme parks or model railways that kids could go on for a little while. It's a sort of an extension of that, I feel, and very much a child of the 70s itself.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with the exhibition, again, it's one of those things that unless you were there at the time, it's difficult to quite get your head round what it was like sort of coming across the exhibition for the first time. I don't know whether John and Alex, you can remember with Blackpool, the first time sort of coming around that little corner and discovering the TARDIS for the first time. And certainly that was what happened with me at Longleat. The thing with Longleat is it was actually quite difficult to find the exhibition. The way it was located, it wasn't that it was out of the way or anything like that. It's just
wasn't it the stable blocks that was behind the main house?
Correct. It's the stable blocks. And so as a result, Longleat itself is something of a maze. The grounds themselves are something of a maze. And so it would take a while to actually find the exhibition. And so for a long time, you would be hearing the theme tune somewhere and you were trying to triangulate it and work out which door you had to go through to eventually find the exhibition. I don't know. So coming across, it was something of a nirvana, and Blackpool really was the same, wasn't it? Because that was difficult to find on the Golden Mile.
Yeah, because it's a side street, isn't it? It wasn't exactly. You always said opposite Central Pier, but it wasn't on the actual prom. It was down a side.
It sounded far more exciting than it was as well.
Yeah. Yes. Well, what is it about that music? Because it was, if you were sitting on Central Beach by Central Pier, as my family would eventually get, they'd pull me out of the exhibition. Right, we're going to the beach now. We're going to build sandcastles. You could still hear the music, and it was so tantalizing, and you just wanted to go back.
Yeah.
So that's very similar in terms of having
you heard the exhibition before you saw it.
Undoubtedly.
I think by the time I made it to Longleat, again, I missed out. It's what they call FOMO, isn't it? I think they cut the music. I think the budget was down. I know. I think the budget was down that low. But by the time I got there, I'm lucky it was open at all. I remember that the woman who was working the till, she was doing it in jodhpurs, and she stank of horse shit. So I think she was doing that. I think she was doing like 3 jobs. So she was going straight from like shoveling something to working the till to sell me a couple of badges. Yeah, it was really funny. I got chased by a lot of geese, which is pretty much par for the course. I don't think I got locked in a toilet that day, although I have been locked in several toilets over the years in various locations. But I can only imagine what the toilet facilities were like at the celebration.
You should do an ebook on that one, Dan, being locked in toilets.
We don't cover the toilets in the book, let's just be clear.
No, we didn't. There's nothing about toilets in the book.
Oh, isn't that? Oh, God, that's volume 2 then. Yeah, well, people laugh when I say about the toilets I've been locked in, as if I'm making it up, but it's true. It's all true. So, yeah, I did wonder about that, obviously because that much footfall that people didn't expect. Bodies, adults and kids, because Longleat is a kind of reverse. That kind of location is very much the reverse of the appeal of something like Blackpool, which I wouldn't say Blackpool is for kids, it's for families, isn't it? But it's sensory overload anyway in Blackpool, whereas Longleat House is a quieter place. There's a stillness
much more
there.
sedate.
And you're going back to sort of nature. It's very much, are you a National Trust member kind of place. Yeah, you said that, I didn't.
Yeah.
So for Doctor Who to invade this location and to bring with it not just the stars of Doctor Who, but the fans as well, all parading around in this way, going from tent to tent, from marquee to marquee, I should say, and probably looking for somewhere to relieve themselves, depending on what the toilet facilities were like. It must have been unlike anything that they'd ever handled before.
Well, was it not the TARDIS, the toilet facilities?
Let's put it this way. They didn't do it again, did they? The Marquis of Bath didn't do this again for any other show.
They never did. And I remember we were all saying that week, and I remember saying, they'll do this every year now. And no, it was never going to happen again. And I think that's the best thing. You're quite right. It should never have happened again. It was definitely lightning in a bottle. It was a one-off. It was Woodstock, and that's how it should have remained. But again, what is difficult to imagine if you weren't there, or if indeed you have read John and Alex's book, because again, this comes across so clearly, is the melee of people around there. There were so many people, but still, I do get frustrated when all people do is concentrate on the fact there were thousands of people in there, because actually, no, it was just a great atmosphere. There was a lot of people. And so it wouldn't matter which direction you look in, you would see somebody. You'd see, again, John Nathan Turner in his lovely satin red jacket from a distance. You might see, he might be escorting John Pertwee that way to a tent. Peter Davison might be walking over behind you to do some autographs. Liz Sladen would be over the back. It was just people. There were
very alive
everywhere. It was very, very alive. It was, lively. Doesn't even begin to do it justice. It was an explosion. There were just so many people around doing so many things. Again, there were Cybermen walking about. There were Sontarans walking about. They'd even taken, I think, John, I'm right, aren't I, in saying they'd taken some of the costumes we think out of the exhibition and put those on people and got them walking around. These weren't fan-made. These were the props, weren't they?
Oh, screen used.
Absolutely. And the other thing, and we've done a story on this in the book, Philip Brennan's put it together, is the idea that, that particular opening of that season, Blackpool was the poorer cousin, because not only did they take the very best stuff and the new stuff that hadn't even been seen on screen at that point, they took all those large illuminations and trucked them down the M6, to Wiltshire. Yeah. And so you had those as part of the entrance. So when you were queuing up, when you were walking in, you'd got these massive oversized Daleks, oversized Cybermen, which if you were a regular visitor to Blackpool, you would have seen as part of the illuminations, that tableau that they used to set up north. But at Longleat, that was almost like a parade greeting you, wasn't it? So how did you remember seeing those signs?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, this is one of the things I remember on the day before, on the Saturday before, watching them erecting those things. And yeah, they were massive. And it was things like that that gave it such a sense of occasion. You were aware, although, with something like this, you kind of think afterwards, well, did you realise you were at something really special? Yes, absolutely. I certainly did realise I was at something special. And that's why I say it was the best weekend of my life. I didn't take it for granted. I was aware that this was a real event. And things like those massive Blackpool illuminations were part of it. They just all fed into it. You were really aware that all stops had been pulled out here. There was no budget cutting at all. There was no penny pinching.
I have to wonder, therefore, Simon. This was the best weekend of your life. I never heard you describe it quite like that before, but I believe you. I absolutely believe you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I wonder if that's how the children felt then and still feel about it after all this time. I do wonder what the cast in particular of Doctor Who would have made of all this. I mean, the makeup people too, because obviously they're used to being shut away in little rooms in television centre, but the cast, they must have been sold. Could you attend this? Are you available? Are you not working on something else? Can you be free for that day or these 2 days? So have you spoken to any of the cast too, John, about this event? And do you think it's just as fondly remembered by them, or do you think when it's a job and it's a job of work, it's just another thing you've got to do? You tug on your costume, you go to work. It's not quite the same for them. What do you think?
We didn't speak to any of the cast, but I was at a convention last month where Mark Strickson was a guest, and he was talking about it in his panel, saying that he'd been asked to go. He thought it sounded like great fun, and he was late because he apparently always used to be late for everything he ever went to. So he arrived at complete bedlam and chaos. So his lasting memory of it was, again, just the sheer number of people.
Yeah.
And I also met Wendy Padbury, and I think in her panel she was talking about Pat Troughton. And I can't remember if that was his first convention or
yes, it was.
I think she basically talked him into doing it because he was very reluctant to do something like that. And I think within minutes she said he was absolutely loving it to pieces. He was really, and then he, of course, went on to do many other conventions in the next couple of years till his sad, untimely passing in 1986. But yeah, I think the thing with Longleat is, Anthony Ainley, somebody who didn't always turn up at conventions very often. Valentine Dial, and maybe he passed away around that sort of time.
Yeah, it wasn't long after.
I think there were many guests at Longleat who were rarities, in addition to all the Five Doctors sets, which had never been seen before or since, and even props like the exploded Death Zone Dalek, which had its one and only public appearance there. So
I didn't know this until Simon
realised that there was so many things at that exhibition that either haven't been seen since, or guests that, for whatever reason, never did another convention or weren't that regular. So I think there was so much for those who made it in. It must have just been, and I guess you don't realise that at the time, that it's a dream come true, and you're seeing something really rare.
And Alex, I never knew a lot of this for years afterwards. I had no idea that the Five Doctor sets were there back in
I learned that
April.
recently. Yeah,
it was Simon that told me, because that's how poorly documented this event has been up to now. I remember.
All you ever see is these photographs of the set, the TARDIS.
Yeah, you described it perfectly earlier, Alex. There were often grainy black and white pictures in a couple of early copies of Doctor Who magazine, Doctor Who Monthly as it was then, and then it was barely touched. And now there's just all this, and it's hard to know where to look. I feel like I'm there.
And that's why, personally, I'm just so pleased that you've put this book together, because it has gathered not all by any means, but an enormous amount of those photos in one place. And as you said, Dan, earlier, there are a couple of websites out there that are sort of that talk about it. So there are various photos scattered across the web.
They're lovely sites, aren't they? But they're lovely sites, but they're very, very personal. Whereas this feels I mean, I haven't seen it yet. I should add, but knowing your work on previous titles, John and Alex, you give us that kind of bird's eye view, and then we gradually go in. It does feel like we're going in with somebody at our shoulder rather than being led through. It's something we're experiencing ourselves. It's a beautiful balance, I think, you strike.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing is, we talked about people wandering around, the stars wandering around, and we did have a lot of pictures that unfortunately we couldn't include because they were, quite poor quality, really. But they're almost in the faces of those cast members. And what you've got to remember, although Tom didn't do the Five Doctors serial, all four of the living Doctors at the time were there. I mean, that's incredible in itself, isn't it? You've got those first, the second, third, fourth, and fifth Doctors actually in
and Tom looks very happy, very present, more than comfortable being there.
Went above and beyond, apparently, in the Orangery when it came to autograph signing, because he overstayed his time. He wanted to sign as many autographs as possible. What we know, we didn't interview the stars, you're quite right. What we know from Julie Jones is, though, that they were very well looked after. They all stayed at the Bath Arms, on a couple of nights around the event. And there's one story I didn't realize at all was the fact that Fraser Hines was on his way and he broke down in his car and never made it.
She's amazing.
Another name,
I personally think I can actually answer the question of what they thought the stars thought of it anyway. And I honestly think they absolutely had a ball. You could tell that the way as they were moving around, as a 15-year-old who is seeing his heroes for the first time, I would have been very sensitive to if they'd been grumpy or dismissive at all. And they weren't. I think they were surprised by the numbers of people there, but they were lapping it up. Look, these are actors. They earn their profession by performing and being adored. And that's exactly what happened for 2 days solid. They were absolutely worshipped. And who wouldn't want to be walking around having to push your way through thousands of people, all of who want to just touch you or get close to you or get your autograph or your photograph? I think they absolutely loved it. And going back to Patrick Troughton earlier on, again, I remember seeing that panel, and he came out a very, very humble man, and quite a little bit like rabbit caught in headlights. And by the end of it, he was rocking it. You could see, you saw the change through sort of the half an hour, 40 minutes that he was on stage. So even Patrick Troughton loved it and didn't expect to enjoy it. So you can see again from John there. No, they trust me. And even the backstage people, the makeup artists, the likes of Malcolm Clark, Peter Howell, they were all there. And again, they were clearly lapping it up, because when would Malcolm Clark otherwise have had chance to talk to a room full of enthusiastic people about how he added music to an otherwise mute scene? So they were getting their little bit in the spotlight as well. So I think they genuinely felt so loved and so valued. I'm not in any doubt they all loved it. Trust me.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about what they actually planned over the 2 days, they pretty much hit everything, didn't they?
Yeah.
You'd got props, you'd got sets, you'd got stars, you'd got backstage crew, you'd got exhibitions of the visual effects department blowing up Daleks live in front of your face. There wasn't a lot really that was missing. I guess one of the things we've heard is the Doctor Who cinema was so popular, but there was just not enough seats for people, was there?
Yes, that's correct. I remember that the only time I tried to get into the cinema was to see, I remember trying to get to see Terror of the Autons, and I did manage to get just about into the back and stand there, and I lasted about 5 minutes, because as much as enticing as it was to watch Terror of the Autons, I just gave up and I couldn't be bothered to. So I went, and I'm really glad now that I did, because there were people that did just sit in that cinema tent the entire weekend and watch old episodes. And I'm really glad now that I didn't fall into that temptation, because you don't need that now. I'm glad I went to see the forums. But yeah, the cinema tent was jammed. and quite smelly. That's all I will say. It was, I remember it being quite smelly. I do
Cinema tense,
that.
but yeah, it is hard to. I mean, by the time I started going to events and Doctor Who club meetings and things like that, they were showing episodes then. But yeah, the videos were starting to turn up, and it was you'd sort of wait up. Well, shall I talk to people? Shall I watch them? But here, it's even more so because there's something, like you said, Simon. If there's something going on there and there and there and there, and there's people milling around it, I don't know how I would have coped. I'm terrible at making decisions anyway.
Well, truth be told, I think if I was to go to the celebration today, I would just go into meltdown. I wouldn't cope. My OCD would not be able to work out which event I went to. But somehow, as a kid, I managed on my own to navigate through it. But as I said earlier, there was just so much happening. You're right. They were blowing up a Dalek and showing the terror of the autons and interviewing Tom Baker and showing you how to add music onto Enlightenment all at the same time. It's just, and you could walk into the props tent and pick up an Earthshock cyber gun. It blows my mind.
Wasn't behind glass. There was no little sign saying "Don't you touch."
They were literally sitting on a table, so you just walk in. I remember picking up an Earthshock cyber gun because they were just sitting on a table. That's you were meant to pick them up and handle them. I mean, it just blows your mind.
Just the thought of it is blowing my mind, and yeah, I'm getting very, very excited. Being a child of the 80s, not only do I need to go for a man wee, but I do, because I'm on a day out, I fancy a choc ice as well. So I'm going to go and try and find the ice cream hut. But in the meantime, you're going to get some far more substantial nourishment, courtesy of our friend Kev on the Fandom Podcast Network. He's sort of our Ed Stewpot Stewart, really, isn't he? So he's going to come across on the tannoy now in a couple of minutes and tell you about all the other fantastic conversations going on across the Fandom Podcast Network on all those other shows. We'll be back with more memories and more in between the covers of this new ebook, Longing for Longleat, when I get back here with Simon, Alex, and John in a couple of minutes. Don't go away.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. Here are the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. Culture Clash, where we discuss the latest in entertainment and pop culture. Blood of Kings, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theater, we celebrate our favorite movies. And Time Warp, our fandom flashback show discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie, TV, and pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Hair Metal Podcast, we cover the rock metal music of the 80s and early 90s. Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, discussing the time-traveling Doctor Who universe. Lethal Mullet, an action film podcast covering the 80s, 90s, and beyond. Also, check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, our Star Wars podcast. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast with a deep dive into the final frontier. The Fandom Show, our Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube show discussing the hottest topics in fandom. The True Believers MCU podcast discussing the Marvel Cinematic and Television Universe. Union Federation, our Star Trek and the Orville show. And we're proud to welcome the BQN Network to the Fandom Podcast Network. Please visit our friends on the BQN Network, a Star Trek Universe podcast that also includes your favorite topics, movies, history, superheroes, and more. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on all major podcast platforms. The Fandom Podcast Network audio master feed is on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
Yes, we've teased and tantalised you there, as always, and we can even clothe you too. There's merch to match all of those shows, including Type 40, if you head over to tpublic.com, search for the Fandom Podcast Network, and that's where you'll find a store full of all the team colours for all of the shows on everything from T-shirts to phone cases, mugs and tapestries, and all manner of other things. Seeing is believing. Treat yourself. Treat your other selves. It all goes to support the Fandom Podcast Network into the bargain too, so Everybody wins. I'm fed and watered and relieved. We've got Alex Storer, John Collier, Simon Horton. Yeah, they're all still here, and we're having a chat about times and places past, now recaptured in ebook form in Longing for Longleat. That's the third of these ebooks that these two gentlemen have put together over the last few years. It must be a really well-oiled machine now, guys. Is that how it is?
I think so. We've developed a certain way of working, and we've got, I think, a style that people recognise as well now. Certainly, the covers, for example, Alex always does the covers, and they always, I think, capture whatever the content of each book is about. And we're just so grateful, really, for the support of all the contributors, because without them, there are no books. They provide the material.
It's a very melancholy title, Longing for Longleat. Was that deliberate too?
We like a bit of alliteration.
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? And that's really how we felt, wasn't it, Alex? We've said we didn't make it there and we never went. And so there's always been that sort of pang that, oh gosh, we missed out. And as Simon's described so brilliantly, it was an absolutely exceptional event. That's how we're all feeling.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think just as I got into trying to, because I didn't start going to conventions until I think 2000, 2001. Once I got into that swing of things, it was like, okay, great, maybe I can finally get to Longleat. And of course, the year I started looking into it, I heard it was closing, and so that was that. And the same thing happened a few years later with Wales. So it's another exhibition that I never made it to. So I think I came up with the title Longing for Longleat quite early on as a bit of a joke, really. But then as we sort of talked about the project, we thought, yeah, that is the title. We don't need to think about what we're going to call it. We've got the title.
Was that a common sentiment amongst
in there, which sort of goes back to that way of thinking? Because when I was quite small, we did have a family holiday in Wiltshire, I think in 1982, potentially. And at that time, I was, maybe 5 years old or so, already a big fan of the show. Had no idea there was an exhibition, and had no idea there was an exhibition very close to where we were. Otherwise, I would have been pestering my parents to go there. So
you were that close to going
without even knowing it, yeah. So
that makes it even worse.
That longing there, but.
And in many ways, it's perfect title for me as well, who's somebody that did go there, for the simple fact that I would give anything to go back to that Longleat exhibition tomorrow. And what's heartbreaking, of course, is it's still there. The police box is still there. It's just painted white and plastered over with awful polystyrene rocks, and it's just awful to see. It's terrible to see.
Have you been back since it's closed then, Simon? You've been back a few times.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long time since I went back, and I wouldn't want to go these days. Longleat is a brilliant, brilliant place, and it's a fantastic destination. And I had so many happy times there. But to go back now without the exhibition and see, as I say, the police box, if indeed it is still there, I know it was up until a year or two ago.
It is still there, yeah.
I couldn't. There's no way I'd go back.
That's the Longleat equivalent of the Blackpool staircase.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And it's now, and the Blackpool staircase has ended up as a shoe shop and all manner of things, hasn't it? So again, it's just rubbing salt into the wound, isn't it? So no, I've no desire to go back to Longleat now. It's too painful, I think, to be honest. Unless, I mean, what they should do. Sorry, John. I was going to say, just to finish off, what they should do is they should do another celebration. And maybe this year will be the year that we do another celebration in Longleat. That would feel special. Sorry, John.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, the reason for doing our books is exactly that. We can't go physically to those places, but what we can do is take that step back in time. And they did. You're right, Dan. The titles are all a bit sort of, retrospective, and Blackpool Remembered, Blackpool Revisited. We've got another one coming up in December. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it on this podcast, am I?
Yes.
Am I? Shall I?
I was going to ask you about it anyway, because the last time we had you on the show,
Let's have an
last
exclusive.
time we had you on the show, I did say to you, you're going to have a long rest now, and you say, oh yeah, but of course, eventually you are back. I mean, I wasn't aware that it had been 2 whole years since the last one, so I'm not surprised you're working on something else. So, what can you tell us? Is this an exclusive or near enough?
Well, it's not really exclusive, because in the final page of the ebook, we put a little advert in about what it's going to be. So this is Lost in Longleat, and we are very much again going to celebrate that particular exhibition or experience, as it was later called. And we just want to do a very similar thing. We've already started to get stories and photographs from people to celebrate the history of it. And again, like you said right at the beginning, Dan, there's always an anniversary, isn't there? Well, this year is 20 years since it closed. So although that's quite a sad thing to think about, we thought it'd be a nice thing to mark, really. And so it will be similar in terms of the content. We're going to take you back there. We're going to walk you through it. What was it like? And then
Brilliant.
We're going to get those personal recollections as well.
Because I went to Llangollen twice, so I can actually have something to say about
Excellent. We've
all
got
of
you
it.
at last.
This is something I can speak on with some amount of authority. Yeah, it was. Both times it was different but the same. And the memories are coming flooding back already. Both, and of course, you're quite right. We are always celebrating something, whether it's something opening or closing or whatever. And the 60th anniversary year, obviously, it seems fitting that all of these places and all of these times get revisited on a kind of whistle stop. So I'm really pleased I've got to speak to you both again here in the 60th anniversary and catch up with you and find out about what you've got coming up next. So for the people who don't know, people who maybe only went to Llangollen, because that was obviously so many decades on, how can they reach out to you and submit their memories, pictures, stories, and whatever?
Well, we have a presence on Twitter, and we are also on Instagram. Alex does a really good job. I'm not on Facebook, but Alex is on Facebook, and he finds people that way as well. Don't you?
People on Facebook, yeah.
Yeah. So any of those platforms, really, we're very accessible, I think, in terms of getting in touch. And it's great because it continues that what we set out to do, which was celebrate all of the different events and exhibitions that have appeared over the years. It's the next part of the jigsaw, really. We're going to try and sort of bridge it at the beginning of the book, because what we get after the celebration, after Blackpool's closed, Longleat's still going on a little bit, but then there was the USA tour, so we're going to mention that briefly, and of course the Behind the Sofa exhibition, which was that big touring exhibition that went around Museum of Moving Image in London and various other places. So that's how the next book's going to start, and then we're going to get really stuck in with what happened in North Wales.
And the thing is, I mean, this is why I, as somebody who has loved the Doctor Who exhibitions all their lives and been to, I think, most of them, if not all of them, actually. I'd have to sort of do a tick list on that. Apart from the original 1972 Science Museum, was only 4 then, didn't get to that one, but there we go. But apart from that, no, as to say, somebody who loves the exhibitions, that's why I love these ebooks. And this was where I got most involved with you guys on the Longleat book, was to try and hammer out the exhibition in 1983, which, as I say, was very important at the time of the celebration, because it was free access, and so everybody that went to the celebration pretty much would have gone into the exhibition at some point. And so Dan, these boys just literally brought me into this crazy mad world, which I never thought existed, of trying to work out the floor plan of what was where in all of those cases in 1983. And it was opening a whole can of worms that was enormously pleasurable. The emails that we had back and forwards, trying to work out where the Dalek was, where K9 was, whether there was a Cybermen in there or not, was just, we would be exchanging emails at midnight, and sometimes they were going so fast backwards and forwards to each other that I would send one to John, he would be answering it while I was sending him another one to say, no, hold on, I've just spotted something else. And then Alex would send it, right, I've just got this photo here. It was the most crazy, mad time. I think, boys, we all felt we were going a little bit mad, didn't we, for a while?
It's part of the process. I mean, and the thing is, with Longleat, we just did the 1 year. With Blackpool, we did the whole decade. So there's a reason why we need dark rooms to go and rock in every now and then.
Yeah, it did feel like that because we got so many photos. John and Alex had collated all these photos together in various sources. And because I was the only one that had been there out of the three of us, we got lots of other people who had been there that were sending in these photos. And so I'd get these photos through an inbox in my email. I'm thinking, are you sure this was there in 1983? And we'd be going back and forth trying to, well, yeah, John would say, I know so-and-so swears blind it was there. And I'm saying, yeah, but I thought, and these are the kind of conversations that were going on, weren't they, lads? I mean, it was just...
I mean, one day, I think we should just publish the email trails because they're fascinating. Just do that.
They were happy days. We somebody would look at it and think, what are these people on? They must have been having a thoroughly rotten time. We weren't. It was brilliant.
We still left it with a bit of a question mark over one exhibit because we'd seen it in one photograph, not in another, and a case that we couldn't ever quite establish what was in it in that year.
Case number 4, the fourth one in, we still just simply not certain what was in there. But my favourite part of all of this, and it went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, was the canine escapade, which if you I think you've got a photo there. There we go. This is canine. Now we know for a fact. Well, I knew for a fact that K9 was in case 5. And this will make sense to you. If you get the ebook, you'll be able to look at the plan and you'll see what we're talking about. But I knew that I could remember that K9 was in case 5. And so while we were having all these discussions about, okay, what else is around it? What's in the other cases? If you look, Dan, you'll see very carefully over the back of K9, you'll see 2 red dots.
Yeah.
Can you remotely work out what that is?
That is the Garm's eyes?
It is. Well done. It is the Garm. It is the Garm. And so I sent off this email to John and Alex saying, whoa, fantastic. I've proven, look at that. The Garm definitely now must be behind the photographer because they're reflected in the glass. So we know that the Garm is in the case directly behind, which was case number 3. And
for the people who don't know what we're talking about, because some people may not know, the Garm was the enormous dog-like alien creature from the 1983 story Terminus, wasn't it? So that was
with glowing red eyes. Right. Yeah, just Google the Garm and you'll immediately see what we're talking about. And so I convinced everybody that Garm was clearly in case 3, which is directly behind the photographer.
Yes.
We went along on this for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then suddenly the penny dropped that actually our physics was all wrong, or my physics was all wrong, because the Garm can't be behind us because of the angle of the glass, which is at an oblique angle to the photograph. No, the Garm has to be to the left. Sorry, to the right. I'm confusing myself now. To the right of K9, which is in case 6. Well, this discussion went backwards and forwards for several weeks. I even involved various other people who I won't name, but are hot on because I wouldn't want to embarrass them. But they're hot on exhibitions, and even they were saying, "No, the Garm is definitely behind the photographer." And I was saying, "No, the science is all wrong, the physics is wrong." So eventually, I think you've got another photo there. I literally took a photo of my other half standing. There we go, standing in the window, looking in, recreating the shots to prove, because you can see the wardrobe doors there behind my other half are clearly going off to the right, and they appear to be going into the left in the reflection. And so that proves that no, the Garm isn't behind us. He is next to. It went on for weeks. I would never have believed we could have done it. That I would end up taking a photograph in my own house to prove to myself I went around for days looking in reflections in windows and mirrors, trying to work out, where is the Garm? Where is the Garm? And we were all convinced, weren't we, boys, that he was behind us. We believed it. We all believed it. So that photo will forever stick with me as the happiest memory, because it was just so much fun.
It is a project highlight, and there's no recovery from it.
Say again, sorry, Alex.
It was a project highlight, and there's no recovery from it.
Yeah. Yes.
Look at the joy on Simon's face. You can hear it in his voice. He's had the time of his life doing this.
I did. It was brilliant. And I'm just very grateful to John and Alex for sort of welcoming me on board. They did all the hard work, by the way. I just came in and did some stuff towards the end. You know, these are the guys that deserve the accolade. But the involvement I had with it was just enormous fun. I would never have believed I could have so much fun trying to work out where the Garm was. That's all I can say.
Well, we can't thank you enough for being involved, Simon. And I love the fact that 40 years on, you are now, restaging what was in a display case at Longleat.
It's nuts, isn't it? Only Doctor Who fans would do this. Only Doctor Who fans.
I've got to say, we've got an expression now. It's called restless perfection, because you never quite get all the answers you're after. We are still arguing about how many mandrels there were in Blackpool in the late 70s. We've still not solved that one, have we, Alex?
No, it keeps Philip up at night, doesn't it?
It does.
I remember you mentioning this when I first came on board. I remember you saying about it's counting mandrels, and I'm like, okay, yeah, what about counting mandrels? What's that got to do with anything? And by the end of the project, I was like, okay, yeah, I get what you're talking about, because it was like that. We're still in debate as to whether there was even a Cyberman in the 1983 exhibition. We don't know. We think there must have been, but we can't find photos. Well, you guys can't find photos. Nothing's come forward, so we don't know. It's.
And it's what's lovely. Time does tell, because I remember in the very first book, Phil Newman talks about the Sontaran costume being used at Coral Island in Blackpool, dressed as a Tin Man, and nobody believed Phil. Nobody. We were like, Phil, you're imagining this. This was a crazy dream you had in the 80s. And since found the photograph. So now we have the pictorial evidence. So you never know. We might get some more answers as time goes on.
Should know better than to argue with Phil Newman. I certainly wouldn't be brave enough.
Well, of course, it's possible that now that the book is out there and people start to read it, it could well be that people start coming back and saying, well, no, actually, I know for a fact K9 was definitely not in case 5, and we can start having that argument all over again.
You can find out fill the gaps there, what was where, and where that Cyberman was. So it's a case, I suppose, of to be continued, because some of your earlier titles were updated, weren't they? There was later editions, revised editions of them. So you leave that open, don't you? You leave the TARDIS double doors open for that.
Yeah, and we talked about that, Alex, very early on, didn't we? The fact that because it is an ebook, you can do that. You can update it when you find out extra information. I mean, we're still looking for the lady who worked at the Blackpool shop. We say it every time, but you found pictures of Irene Perry, Simon, which took you directly back. So these folk who were around, these characters who weren't part of the program, but were very much part of the exhibitions. It's lovely to celebrate them too.
Absolutely, and for anybody that did go to Longleat, they will have remembered Irene in Perry in the shop, who was just one of the most wonderful people you could ever hope to meet. And certainly the photos that you guys found of the Longleat shop are just nirvana to me, because you see all of that. You were saying, Alex, earlier about you tried to get your parents to buy as much as you could because it was a once only. You look at those photos now and you think, oh my God, look at those, all those original profile prints and jigsaws and Dennis Fisher figures. And you could just go along and just hoover them all up for a couple of quid a time or whatever. And they're worth hundreds now. I mean, Alex, I know it's particularly painful for you, isn't it? Looking at some of those exhibition pictures, the shop pictures.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Things that I had when I was little that I got rid of and wish I kept or not opened, and this, that, and the other, and you're just seeing them all sat there, all new in rows.
Brand new, in mint condition, and that's
absolute torture. It makes you wonder why we do it to ourselves. Why you do this over and over again, put yourselves through this. But I think I can tell by the smiles on all of your faces there, and having roped in Simon to this latest project too, that it's simply for the love of Doctor Who and for the love of these memories and times and places past. And I do feel that some of this is unfinished business. I think you're doing yeoman's work here, preserving, collating, that word collating again, it's really, really important. And I think, I don't think if you'd have done this, I can't imagine who would have done. I think it's the way you've both combined to work on both of these projects and what you've managed to promote in people out there to rally to the core. It really has been something special. And I hate to see you guys burn out. Don't get me wrong. But however long you're prepared to continue investing in these titles, I'm sure there'll be people like myself with more than willing ears and eyes, ready to go back in time and space, wherever you're going to send us with the next one of these ebooks. So I can't thank you enough. And I would imagine that a lot of people out there feel exactly the same way.
Well,
It's all tested.
Okay, so Longing for Longleat is available exclusively to download from Blackpool, remembered, for the website. The link is in the show notes to the podcast and the description to the video track too. It's all for free, collated and edited by John Collier and Alex Storer and company, the Exhibition Army. And I'm sure you'd love to know what people think of it all once they get it in front of their eyes, wouldn't you, gentlemen?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the best bit, isn't it? When you let it free, and the response that you get back is lovely. And Dan, we're definitely getting you involved in the next one, so look out.
Well, I'll do my level best to be of some use. It's hard to top that.
You can just start counting mandrels now, and I'll just warn you now. Be ready for it.
I can't imagine how I can sort of ask family members to reenact certain scenes where I think things were. But hey, I'll give it a go if I can be of any help in any way. Absolutely, count me in. You're going to have a rest this time, guys. You're going straight into the Llangollen book, Alex.
Straight in.
Already started. Yeah, we're already getting stuff. We're putting it together.
I know. I was just going to say, John, it was kind of odd because we were still just debating a couple of final points on the Longleat book in email, and John was already sending through the first article that had been written for Llangollen. I'm like, what? I can't believe we're plunging straight in. Well, you guys are plunging straight into it. Well done to you.
There's less time as well. We've got just a few months for this one.
Yeah, it will be. I think the one thing that's going to help us is the fact that because it was a permanent exhibition, it didn't really change that much.
Yeah.
Over the time that the exhibits were pretty much the stationary. They didn't move around. We've got that to tell, and we've also obviously got the story of Dapple to tell as well. So we're hoping to include quite a big section on that, and the toy factory that was there. So just enough time hopefully for Christmas.
Got everything crossed for you, as always. That's going to be, and I hope you're going to come back and tell us all about it too at the end of the year. Maybe we'll have a bit of a Christmas party and all get together again. But that's the old girl starting up and calling time on yet another edition of Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast. I'll be back with another one soon. Look out for that wherever you found this. It could have been at the dedicated home feed for Type 40. That's over at type40.podbean.com. Maybe we rolled up on the podcatcher of your choice. So Spotify, Amazon Music, Stitcher, iHeart Radio, TuneIn, Google Play, all those places. We're on the Podbean app itself, which is regularly updated, looking very cool lately. We're on YouTube, the world's largest streaming platform, here on the Spacebook YouTube channel, and we're also on the fabulous Fandom Podcast Network's own master feed. Still loaded up with so many treats for your ears. Never mind on the weekly. They've got it coming to you, and on the daily. So please consider a trip sideways in time for more quality shows from the FPN. Now, maybe you'd like to have your say about all of this. Good news is you can reach out to us through our social media. That's on Instagram and Twitter at Type40 Doctor Who, or you can email us if you're feeling so inclined. Type40doctorwho@gmail.com for that. And what else? Oh, yes. How could I forget? If you want some real-time, extra-dimensional chit-chat, that's even better. We've got you covered there over in the Type 40 Facebook groups. That's where you'll find regenerations upon regenerations worth of Doctor Who fans. They're congregating there and celebrating the classic series of Doctor Who and the days of the exhibitions, all those memories of the shows and everything around it too. Same with new Doctor Who, that new generation of fans that came along in the noughties, they're gathered there too, doing exactly the same. And all of us are looking to the future, aren't we, at what's to come in all new Doctor Who from later on in the anniversary year and then into 2024 with Ncuti Gatwa as the 15th Doctor. Are you guys keeping abreast with everything that's happening for the 60th anniversary year and this sort of latest rebirth of the show? Are you still invested in it? Are you still looking to the future of this brand?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anniversaries are always a nice time to celebrate and think back to your love for the series. And there's so much coming up, isn't there, that's going to really help celebrate that. Unfortunately, not a celebration at Longleat, but other things we can enjoy, I'm sure.
They missed an opportunity there, didn't they?
It is. I mean, how you were describing it, the stable block with the TARDIS painted white. It is a kind of monument to times past, which is kind of sad. I'd like to think that with all this new investment of resources and big brands like Disney Plus, like Sony, that maybe there was talk a little while ago, if you remember, that the BBC were going to set up some sort of complex in London where they were going to have a sort of a miniature theme park, which they planned on Doctor Who being a part of. There was going to be a Doctor Who zone, a Peaky Blinders zone, all those kind of things were going to happen. And I think the investment fell through, which I'm quite glad about. I didn't fancy going to that anyway. The idea of maybe somewhere tucked away, somewhere like Longleat House again, somewhere that feels like a real destination, somewhere special, tucked away, rather than at a big resort or in some complex that you're going to be charged an arm and a leg to get into, and something that could hopefully fuel more memories in the same way that both Blackpool and Longleat has, clearly with your exhibition army out there, and this can all continue because things have gone so corporate now. And whilst BBC Enterprises was corporate, wasn't it, Simon? There was something homespun about it all.
Yeah, it was very homespun, and the whole thing about the Longleat celebration is it wasn't a convention. It couldn't have been more different, for example, from the XL convention in the 50th anniversary, which is probably sort of the closest comparison you can make. It wasn't a convention. It really was a celebration. They picked the correct name when they called it a celebration, because it wasn't your normal convention that you are used to having these days. In a hotel, with everybody just crammed into a room watching one event happening in a linear form. It was far more than that, and I'm not sure you'll really ever recreate it. And it's a shame. I wish somebody would try. Somebody needs to give it a go.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Okay, let's have some of the social media links again, guys, for the people out there who have heard enough and they want to get this right away. Where can they find your book? What's the social medias for you on Twitter and Facebook and all those places, John?
So Twitter, we're Blackpool at Blackpool7485. Instagram, I think we're just Blackpool Remembered, and the website you've already given out, but Alex probably knows it better than I do to download the book.
Yeah, it's the same, isn't it? It's Blackpool Remembered 7485.wordpress.com, I think. But I think it's got to the stage now where you can type Blackpool Remembered into Google and it pulls it up.
Well, hey, you've arrived in that case.
Top of all the searches. Well, I can't wait to see how it does. We'll be watching as always. Where can people find you on social media, Alex? Because you've got so many other projects as an artist, as a musician. You wear many hats, don't you? So where can people keep tabs on what you're doing?
I do, yes. Usually, I think on Twitter, I'm at The Light Dreams, which is my musical name. Same on Instagram. And on Facebook, if you search for Alex Storer / The Light Dreams, I think you'll find everything there. Or visit my website at thelightdream.net. I also run Doctor Who fansite 70.net, which is a project I've had since 2002. Resurrected recently-ish. So I try and keep that up to date when I can, when I'm not busy doing other things or getting lost in exhibition memories.
We'll get the links to that and put them in the show notes and the video description as well. I don't think you've told me about that before. I'll have to go and have a look. Maybe you have. My memory's getting shocking. How about you, John? Anything else you'd like to plug or you want to tease for the future?
If people are watching and they went to Llangollen, get in touch because that's the next one and we need as much material as possible as ever. That's going to be the the big one going forward, and hopefully, like I say, the big Christmas gift for all our fans.
Yeah, it's testament to the fandom, the success of these books. It's all down to the contributions. We couldn't do it without anybody that's sent all the pictures and memories in, whether it's one photo or a dozen or just a nice write up. It all helps. It all goes in the melting pot, and it makes a really nice project at the end of it. And I think we hit on this earlier in this. Until we did this, there wasn't anything of the like. The old exhibitions had sort of been forgotten about almost. They were never mentioned in the magazine, in any of the official big books like the Vault or the whatever. It was a postage size photograph of the same picture from 1974.
An afterthought, yeah.
So I think, and there was an appetite, and I sensed that from joining the Facebook exhibitions group. And there was really an appetite for those old exhibitions. So I think mine and John's coming together on that first project, we knew we were about to create something which there was a gap in the marketplace for. I think it feels kind of coincidental that at the same time we have the Tell Us book that came out, and then Real Time resurrected Doctor on Display, which I've also been involved in, and John as well, which is doing very well at the moment on the international science fiction film festival circuit. And the Blackpool documentary is going to be out this spring at the end of the month if all goes well. So it's all come together. So from nothing about the exhibition to suddenly having our books, DVDs, article in Doctor Who magazine, it's all sort of come together. And I think a lot of fans that have waited a long time for all of this are really happy. And certainly with our projects, they being digital publications, I mean, they can be living projects, they can keep growing, but we sort of like to put a stop to them and move on to the next one. Otherwise, we would never finish counting the nodules.
Well, it's sincere thank you for everything that you're doing for the fandom, both of you, and you, Simon, getting involved in this one. It does sound like something really special.
It was a pleasure to be involved on what level I was, but yeah.
There's no escape now.
Yeah, I'm trying to backpedal now. I had nothing to do with it really. I don't want anything to do with the next one. I'm already roped into Llangollen, so bring it on.
Yeah, he may be the original lunatic, as I often say, but in this, I have to point out this time he's come dressed not on brand for a change. He's come dressed as one of the cast of Star Trek, as I've said before. He's a science officer there from the Enterprise. But apart from that,
wrong show.
Yeah, you can't be on brand every time, can you? Where can people reach out to you on social media, Simon?
I'm very old school. Facebook, that's where I am. You'll find me on Facebook.
Simple. Yeah, and I'm even simpler, but I am on several social media platforms, so you can get hold of me on Instagram and Twitter, where I am known as the Spacebook. That's where you'll find me wheezing and groaning, ranting and raving about all things geeky, inside and outside of the TARDIS, and yes, having a little bit of a moan because I wasn't there. I never got to go to Longleat 83, but I am going to get to go when I get my eyes on this brand new ebook. That's what I'm off to do now. But yeah, that's it for this time. We always have the space time. No, we don't. we always have the time.
Well.
It was going brilliantly, everybody. Okay, take 2. Take 40. We always have the time. If you have the space here at Type 40, but that's it for this time. We'll speak to you all again soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Drive carefully.